Hello, I'm Ross Jernstrom, live from Memorial Stadium, and I am here for the introduction of Scott Frost as the new head football coach here at the University of Nebraska. Jeff Packer is joining me. This is a big day, not only for the university and the football team, but the whole state of Nebraska.
No doubt. I think there's a degree of this being cathartic for a lot of people. A lot of people felt like they won a game yesterday with UCF taking that AAC title game, and to see a native son come back, a lot of people are very ecstatic.
Well, we've already talked to one player on the Nebraska football team, Tanner Lee, the quarterback. There was some talk that he may leave the university because Scott Frost's offense doesn't really work to his talents, but we were kind of surprised today. And we talked to Tanner, and he said he's looking forward to playing under the new head coach, Scott Frost, and he's glad to meet him and glad he's the new head coach.
Yeah, they had a players-only meeting today with Scott Frost. He arrived in Nebraska last night and got a chance to get to Memorial Stadium today and talk with current Huskers. I think the general theme we get is excitement coming out of that meeting. I think Scott's a great salesman and obviously one of the hottest young coaches, as Bill Moose said in the release yesterday. And we got a chance to catch up with Tanner as well as Freedom Akinmuladun, and we want to give a chance for you to hear what they had to say this morning.
You know, we guys pay attention to everything, so I think it wasn't really a huge surprise, but you know, we're really excited. You know, I think he's a great guy. I think he's the guy for the job, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting to know him and getting ready to work for him.
Tanner, just talk about a coach coming in with the highest scoring offense in the nation. I mean, what does that make a quarterback feel like?
I keep saying the same word, exciting. It's exciting. It's going to be a lot of fun, I think, and I'm just really looking forward to getting down to it and getting down to work and you know, building a relationship and getting comfortable, and I'm just really looking forward to it. So it's gonna be fun.
So how'd the meeting go?
Oh, it went great. Got to meet Scott Frost and some of his staff, and it's going to be really interesting to see what's going to be for us next year.
That was Nebraska quarterback Tanner Lee talking about how happy he is to be in this offense under Scott Frost and him coming in as the new head coach. And Jeff, how does he fit?
Well, it's really interesting. I think a lot of people point to Tanner's lack of mobility, but if you look at the offense that UCF ran in that AAC title game yesterday, Mackenzie Milton threw for nearly 500 yards, and Tanner Lee's approached that number a couple times this year. So I think he's very confident in his arm, and he's using language, as you heard, like he's ready to come to work in January. Don't think for now that Tanner Lee's taking his last snap as a Husker.
Well, they have a seating chart here for the news conference today, and they have kind of the VIPs, their names on them and everything. And one of the names is Tom Osborne. He's going to be in the front row along with his wife Nancy, and also Matt Davison and his wife. So this is kind of like, you know, back home, all the families together for this one. And what a proud day it is for Tom Osborne to have one of his former players become the head coach and a player that led him to a national championship in his final season on the sidelines.
Yeah, we discussed it earlier this morning. Those two went through a lot together. Obviously, Scott's departure for Stanford, despite a recruiting battle with Tom Osborne and the Huskers, his eventual decision to return with encouragement from Osborne. And he said that it was Tom that drew him back here and the patience it took to recruit him a second time. Obviously, they had a couple of stumbles in '96, and in '97, you're talking about the player who led an impassioned plea after the thumping of Tennessee in the Orange Bowl, that this team deserves a share of the title and Osborne should ride off into the sunset. So very special connection.
Yeah, I covered Scott during the 1990s when he was the quarterback and when he was in high school out in Wood River, and he had that recruiting battle with Stanford, and he ultimately decided to go with Bill Walsh, the former head coach of the San Francisco 49ers, who led him to 3 Super Bowl titles. I mean, pretty impressive. And then he comes out to Wood River and decides to recruit Scott Frost, and also his brother Steve to go to Stanford, who was playing at Colorado State. And there were a lot of people that were not happy that Scott decided to leave the state and go to play at Stanford, and it didn't work out. He only played there for 2 years and then came back to Nebraska in 1995.
It was a long journey that brought him back here. I think in many ways it made him the player and the person that he is. I think a lot of his former teammates would agree with that, and particularly Steve Warren did last night when I got a chance to speak with him. They're excited to see him come back, and it's really interesting. That journey took him through Bill Walsh. And then obviously Tom Osborne facilitated an NFL draft in 6 years in the league where he worked alongside Bill Belichick and Bill Parcells. So it's quite the coaching tree he comes from. He's worked with a lot of great ones.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people realize that when Scott was drafted in 1998 in the third round by the New York Jets, he was drafted as a safety, and he played on special teams for the Jets. He also played at Cleveland and the Green Bay Packers, and also at Tampa Bay. He had 6 seasons in the NFL, but they weren't on the offensive side of the ball. They were on the defense. So he's got a perspective that a lot of head coaches don't have.
Yeah, he's known for racking up a lot of yards offensively, but they run a 3-4 down there. That should transition well for players who have been in a 3-4 this last year, and they know how to stop players on the other side of the ball. They had a couple misfortunate turnovers yesterday in that AAC title game, but they know how to stop things, and Scott played with those black shirts back in the days when those guys had some nasty and some muscle to throw around, and I think he's really going to want to restore that in this program.
Well, he's got some Husker blood down on his staff already down in Orlando. Barrett Ruud, who was the all-time leading tackler here at the University of Nebraska, is on his staff down in Central Florida, and he was kind of the director of the football operations, handled a lot of the office stuff. And also there was a player, Ryan Held, who was a wide receiver for the Nebraska football team back in the 90s with Scott. He is the running backs coach at Nebraska, down at Central Florida. And also Greg Austin also was on his staff. So those guys are expected to come up here to Lincoln and join his staff, and that'll be a big question during today's news conference. How is that coaching staff going to shape up?
And we're not entirely sure how that shakes down. There are obviously there's one former Husker and John Perella on this staff right now that maybe some want to see stick around. We're not sure where it goes. A lot of those names you mentioned are guys that Scott saw at Oregon, Northern Iowa, different stops during his coaching career. So they go back with Nebraska. They have ties to this state, but they also have deep ties to Scott. So you're going to see some loyalty there. He's going to want to bring up guys that have accomplished a lot in the last 2 years.
Well, watch Scott Frost at today's news conference almost be a salesman because he's going to try to sell his football style here at Nebraska to potential recruits. And there's an early signing day. This is the first year this has ever happened. It's December 20th, and he's going to try to keep those recruits that have already committed to Nebraska and some of those players that have decommitted to Nebraska and try to sell them to come play for his style of offense, and that's a big sell job right now for a team that was 4-8.
It is very unique, and you're going to see some dramatic changes, I think. You look at that offense, and it's not necessarily what they were running with Tanner Lee under center, but for those recruits, you're talking about the youngest and possibly hottest coach in college football in terms of what he's accomplished on the field. Bill Moose said as much in his press release yesterday. They landed a real catch, and it's not often that as a coach or as a coaching search, you get who you're looking for. They landed their top dog. Just ask Tennessee how difficult that process can be. So major win yesterday for the program.
Well, it's going to be interesting. Some of the former players in their Nebraska letter jackets, I could see Tom Heiser coming in to the arena here and the stadium. It's kind of a who's who of Huskers, former Huskers. They're coming off the elevator. A lot of people excited to see the introduction of Scott Frost today. We're just minutes away. He's going to be at a table along with Bill Moose, the athletic director. Bill Moose will speak first and introduce Scott Frost, and he'll have an opening statement, and then they'll have question and answers from the media, and then they're going to break off after the news conference is over and take some photo ops down on the football field. The signs here at Memorial Stadium, they're all over the place that say, "Welcome home, Scott Frost and family," and it's kind of an exciting time just for everybody who played with him.
This is a great atmosphere. We've reached that special time right before a presser where every time an elevator opens, the room gets quiet. And I just love that. There's a lot of anticipation, and it would be that way for any coaching candidate, any coaching position filled. But this is Scott Frost. It's a little unique. A lot of players continue to pour off, current players of the past, and there's a lot of tradition walking through these halls right now.
A lot of letter jackets with Ed on them, former lettermen who played here at Nebraska. And this is, I've been to a lot of these with Frank Solich, Bill Callahan, Bo Pelini, and Mike Riley. And I've never seen so many people in one room where the introduction of a head coach. And, it's pretty neat.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about something that this program hasn't had since 2003 when Frank Solich obviously wound up leaving Nebraska. A native son and a player of this program playing in this state and coming back to coach this this program through some pretty tough times right now. He's charged with a tough task of getting this program back to where it was used to being in the 1990s or even the early 2000s. So it's going to be difficult.
One of the questions that's going to come up today is defense, and that's the thing that needs to be fixed at Nebraska. They finished in last place out of 14 teams in the Big Ten Conference in total defense, and I don't know, Jeff, if that's even a quick fix for this coaching staff to come in here and change this defense in his first year. I think it's going to take some time, and they've got a very difficult schedule in 2018, so that's going to be a real challenge for him and his staff.
And that's part of why they locked him down for such a long period of time on that contract. He is one of the highest paid coaches, I believe, in the top 10 in FBS right now, and so there's part of the reason that contract is the way it is because it's going to take patience. I think a lot of people would be remiss to think otherwise. Getting this defense back to where they want it and getting this offense clicking consistently is going to take some coaching. My goodness, the amount of people and former players, there's a lot of weight coming off these elevators, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's more muscle than I'll ever have in my life, but we're seeing a lot of guys right now.
Yeah, I just saw Stan Parker, who's a former player from back in the 1970s and 80s, walk off the elevator from Bellevue. Great to see him. Eric Crouch, the Heisman Trophy winners, over to my left. He just walked in. So a lot of dignitaries, politicians, administration, former players, Heisman Trophy winners. It's an exciting day for the university, and they're all waiting to hear the introduction of Scott Frost. And this is a home run. Not only a home run, this is a grand slam. He's one of the hottest coaches people in the country. Chip Kelly was probably the most sought after coach this season, but Scott Frost, with what he did in 2 years at Central Florida and being the offensive coordinator at Oregon when Marcus Mariota was the Heisman Trophy winner, they knew what kind of offensive mind Scott Frost has, but to be a head coach and to turn a program around in 2 years that didn't win a game 2 years ago. Last year they won 6 games, they went to a bowl game, and then this year to finish 12-0 and win the American Athletic Conference yesterday in a double overtime win. It's got to be, it's a grand slam home run for Nebraska to get him here.
It's the quickest turnaround in FBS history. Winless 0-12 to 12-0 just 2 years later. There's a school of thought in college football that if you can win at the power, the Group of 5 level, if you can win at the mid-major level, then you can win at the Power 5 level. Scott Frost is a proven winner at this point. Small sample size in 2 years, but I think of the X factor of him coming home and knowing this culture, and I think that that's really going to be what pushes the equation over the edge and gets this program back up.
Yeah, it's an exciting day, and you can just see all the enthusiasm in the room. It's building, waiting for Scott Frost and Bill Moose to enter the room. They'll be sitting at a table, and Bill Moose will introduce Scott Frost. His family, Larry and Carol Frost, they also are from Nebraska. I mean, Larry was a fullback, his father, back in the 1960s under Bob Devaney. He played football here at Nebraska, and he met Carol, his wife, who was an Olympic track and field athlete here at the University of Nebraska, and she also coached track here at Nebraska later in her career. So there's a big, huge Husker tie in their family, and it's going to be big for this school.
Yeah, Six Sports actually reached out to Carol and Larry earlier this week a couple of times. They declined to comment. We get some applause, and I think the man of honor might be here.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, we're going to join the news conference momentarily. We can see some of them coming off the elevator, and we are going to join them when the news conference begins.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll tell you what, Jeff, why don't you go over to the camera, and we'll go live from there, and as soon as Bill starts, we'll get going. Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay. Seems like we've been doing this a lot lately. But this is fun. This is a celebration for several reasons. But I want to offer some thanks first to some people very instrumental in getting this all accomplished. President Bounds, Chancellor Green, Coach Osborne, where are you? Very big in this, and that I'll talk about a little bit later. Turnkey Search and my good friend Gene D. Filippo, and of course my staff did a fabulous job and continue to do this great job as we go through the process. As I mentioned, this is a celebration. It's a celebration for the University of Nebraska and for Husker football. Certainly a celebration of bringing one of our own home, a favorite son. But I need to tell you this, if I were the athletic director at Missouri, Oklahoma State, or UCLA, my sights would have been on this guy. Doesn't matter that I'm at Nebraska. He is, in my opinion, not only the premier young coach in America, I believe he was everybody's first choice, and I got the pick of the litter. We got the pick of the litter. And I need to tell you that when we went into the weight room and Scott didn't know that the football lettermen were going to be in there, and there were over 100. It looked like there were 200. That choked me up. And we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to build this program back. And it gives me a great deal of pleasure at this time to introduce the 30th head football coach at the University of Nebraska, Scott Frost.
Thank you, Bill. It's an honor for me to be here. I can't tell you how special this is for a kid that grew up in Nebraska, basically grew up on this campus when Mom was a track and field coach here, and I was running around getting in trouble and getting run over on the Devaney Center track. From there to playing here, to being other places coaching for as long as I have, to get an opportunity to come back here is special to me. Words can't describe how much it means to me to be back here in a place that I love, a place that I understand, a place that I want to represent. I want to thank Coach Osborne for all he's done for me. Thank Matt Davison for helping make this happen. I want to thank Ronnie and Hank and Bill for choosing me and believing in me to lead this program. My sincere thank you to all you former players that showed up, my friends that showed up in the weight room to welcome me. My first thought when I walked in was, this is unbelievable, and my second thought was, most of these guys have been eating too much. I'm thrilled to be back because I think the time is right for this, and it wasn't always that way. But with Hank and Ronnie and Bill, I think the leadership is right. I think the time is right. I think the state is hungry for unity. When I was here under Coach Osborne, there was unity of purpose and unity of belief and unity of understanding and unity of support for this program, what it stood for, and what it was accomplishing. This program needs that again. This state needs that again. And when I walked into that weight room and saw all those players there, really made me excited about the fact that we can get this entire state behind this football program, get this entire state pulling for these players, get this entire state excited about what's going on, and we're going to put a product on the field that this entire state can be proud of. It's going to take a lot of hard work. It's going to take a lot of dedication from a lot of people. But there was a formula that worked here for a long time, and times have changed a little, but some of those same things are what is going to make this work again. And that's a lot of good people that care about this place, working really hard. It's toughness, it's dedication, it's work ethic. That's what Nebraska is, that's what the people of Nebraska are, and that's what this place is going to stand for while I'm here. So thank you.
Nicely done. So, probably be a question or two.
Media, go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll get a mic to you.
Hi, Scott. Welcome home. Ross Jernstrom from WWT in Omaha. Coach Osborne, what kind of influence did he have on your decision to come back to Nebraska?
Coach has been a mentor to me my whole life, and he was definitely played a part in this. What I respect about it can do those things. I want to run out of this tunnel again in front of a bunch of fans that are going to cheer for us and applaud the other team and all the things that I love about Nebraska. And I'm looking forward to that. But first, I'm looking forward to getting a little sleep.
All right, we will end the upfront portion. We'll have Coach and Bill stand here in front of the table for a quick photo op, and then we'll have some breakout interviews as well.
Let me know when. Well, everybody, there you have it. Scott Frost's introductory press conference as the Cornhuskers' next football coach, the 30th football coach in Nebraska history, as Athletic Director Bill Moose announced. Frost right now wrapping things up at the podium. He's set to do a little meet and greet here, with perhaps a couple of photo opportunities with a helmet and a ball, as we've seen in the past. But the overall message there from a former Husker and a national championship quarterback is one of trying to do things the right way. And right now we're joined by WWT Sports Director Ross Jernstrom. Ross, big takeaway for me right now is doing things the right way. Scott said it several times.
I'll tell you what, very impressive introductory news conference for Scott Frost. I tell you what, he's ready to go. I mean, he is so anxious to get everything started here at Nebraska and just make things right. I mean, he talked about righting the ship, getting this thing back on track the way it was when he was a player back in the 90s and led this school to a national championship, and how important it was. The walk-on program, he talked about that. Just getting the players, we're on this offense, we're going to play fast, we're going to have fast meetings, we're going to practice fast, and we're going to play fast. And you get that sense that offense that he was coached at Oregon with the Ducks when they were so strong, and this offense that he had at Central Florida that was the highest scoring offense in the entire nation, 48 points a game. You get that sense he wants to bring that here to Lincoln, and he wants the players here to feel that.
Yeah.
And first of all, he's going to get those recruits over the next 3 weeks. December 20th is the first signing period for recruits, so that's the important date. And also, he wants them to go home and enjoy Christmas, because he's probably going to be coaching Central Florida in the bowl game. That hasn't been worked out yet. But then he wants them to come back in January and work in that weight room. And he told an interesting story. He did not know the letterman, and there's about 100 lettermen, former players, many of his teammates. He did not know they were going to be here, and they were in the Tom Osborne complex in the weight room, and he walked in there with about 100 of former Husker players and got a rounding big applause. And it was an emotional moment for him to come over and do that?
Oh, certainly. I think that was really significant and very much showed a great attendance here from those former players. We learned a little bit more about the timeline in terms of interest from Nebraska shown by Athletic Director Bill Moose, and as far as when Scott accepted the job, he said it was earlier this week when it became official. However, contact maybe began in November. Bill Moose alluded to a meeting in Philadelphia facilitated in part by Matt Davison.
Yeah, they had played Temple about 2 or 3 weeks ago up in Philadelphia, and Matt Davison had arranged a meeting at a hotel for Scott and the athletic director, Bill Moose, to have a face-to-face talk. And what Scott wanted was time, and that's why this contract is over 7 years. It's probably not going to be an overnight thing. And he really was impressed with Bill Moose and the commitment of the administration with the president, Hank Bounds, and the chancellor, Ronnie Green. And he felt that he could work with all these people, and that's one of the reasons he came home.
Certainly another reason he came home, and we're looking at him right here, Tom Osborne, a coach who obviously played a massive role in Scott Frost's recruitment right out of high school at Wood River High, and then wound up at Stanford before returning to the sidelines with Coach Osborne. They went through a lot together. Coach, we want to thank you for coming on here. How special was this day for you?
Well, it's a good day. I'm glad Scott got here, and it seems like everybody's on board, and so that's pleasing. And he was really torn. It's really hard to leave your players. I know how that is, and so I'm just really glad that he decided this was the right move for him. And he understands a lot of things that need to be done to people that haven't been here, haven't experienced it, just don't know. And so he's in a position to make some moves and make some decisions that'll be really critical. And I think in the long run will really improve this program.
Tom, you have contact with him all the time, and what role did you play in having Scott come back to Nebraska?
Well, I didn't tell him, we want you to come back because this is where you belong. I want you to come where it's best for you. But I think I was able to allay some of his fears that he had about this place concerning leadership. He didn't know Ronnie Green, didn't know Hank Bounds, he didn't know Bill Moose, and naturally the people you're working for are a big part of whether you're going to be successful or not. And so I did know those people, and I was able to say some supportive things and say, I think these guys are going to be good, and I think they're really committed to you long term. And of course the fan base, kind of can blow hot and cold, and they're very passionate, and Twitter and all that kind of stuff. And I said, I think you're able to, if you keep your head down, you can survive this kind of environment. But the environment's going to be the same at Florida, at Tennessee, at UCLA, at A&M. If you come to a major program, there's going to be some interest and there's going to be some heat. But he's built in such a way he can handle it.
There is an office at the Tom Osborne complex that has your name on it, and your desk is there. Will you be a part of this, athletic department as an advisor for Scott in the future?
Well, it's important that I do what I'm doing. I'm working with teammates. I put in 40, 50 hours a week with teammates. If Scott ever wants something, I'll do it. But the last thing he needs is some old guy that's 80 years old hanging around practice saying, well, you ought to play this guy or you ought to run this play. So that's not my province. But anything that he needs from me, he'll get it. And so I'm only a phone call or a text message away. But I don't plan to office and up one flight of stairs from him. That's not my style, and that's not necessarily what he needs.
How proud a moment for a former coach to have his former player come back to Nebraska and become the head coach of the Nebraska football team. How proud a moment is this for you?
Well, I'm really pleased. There's some people that I'd say, well, I don't care if he played for me or not, this isn't a good fit. But in this case, it's a good fit. And Scott is the right kind of person. He's got the right kind of values, and the most important thing that a coach does is he establishes a culture. And Scott knows what the culture was. He knows how to do it, and he won't do it exactly like I did. This is not a return to 1997, but he has enough information and he has enough value of himself. He has good enough character that he'll get it done. And so that's what I really feel good about, is just the fact that what he brings to the table. And so it's a good day for Nebraska.
Thank you so much for joining us, Coach. Good luck, and we'll talk to you in the future. Okay, the legendary Hall of Fame coach, Tom Osborne, talking about one of his former players. As soon as this interview ended, there's about 5 or 6 reporters that have surrounded him, so he's very popular today. And the Scott Frost coaching era starts today. Jeff, it's a very emotional day for a lot of these former players and for Coach Osborne today.
Yeah, I think it's almost surreal. People have been wanting this for so long. Since about mid-November is when his name really started to get floated. But after a 5-0 start, 4-0 start, a lot of people were very interested in Scott Frost. To see a native son come back is huge. The quote of the press conference for me today, Ross, is when somebody asked, how is your offense and system going to adjust to the Big Ten? Yeah. And he responded by saying, I'm thinking the Big Ten, I hope they have to adjust to us. That's going to go a long way. That's going to be the quote of the day.
And that's going to motivate a lot of his Big Ten foes, but they're worried about that offense, if you've seen it. Even when he was at Oregon, that offense was so tough to stop when they played Big Ten teams. So it's going to be an interesting thing to see this offense roll out. Tanner Lee, we talked to before the news conference today. He's coming back this spring to try to quarterback this team. Whether his talents are fit Scott Frost's offense, we'll find out, but he's looking forward for him to become the head coach and coach him.
A lot of people think that Frost's offense demands a dual threat guy. I wouldn't necessarily agree with that notion. You look at Mackenzie Milton throwing for 500 yards almost yesterday in that AAC title game. I think Tanner's talents very much lend towards Scott Frost, and there's a lot of speed in this backfield too. I'd be very interested to see how he molds to his personnel and how they mold to him.
One thing that Scott touched on is his coaching staff, and it appears that a lot of his coaches from down at Central Florida and Orlando will be coming with him up here to Nebraska. They may not be big names on the coaching front. He said, you know, why go out and try to find some guy who led the nation in this category? He's going to bring his guys up here, and there are several who have Nebraska ties. Barrett Ruud, the all-time leading tackler here at the University of Nebraska, is in his office like a director of football operations for them. Ryan Held, who played here on the national championship teams in the mid-90s, was a wide receiver. He's the running back coach. So he's bringing back some guys that know what Husker football is like.
Absolutely. One of those guys served for the Pipeline in 2006. Greg Austin helps the offensive line for UCF, and he's among those expected to come up to Lincoln with Frost. Several guys go back further with Scott from his Oregon days, UNI days. He's coached both sides of the ball, and he's really integrated his history into what he has on staff right now. It's going to be great to see them hit the ground.
Yeah, it is, and he's got a timetable here in the next few weeks, recruiting, going to coach football down at Central Florida, and then coming back here. He says he hasn't gotten much sleep, hasn't eaten much. He still looks pretty good. He's 42 years old. He and his wife Ashley had a baby earlier, or just last month, and so it's been a busy time for him, but he says this has been the best year of his entire life, and that's kind of cool.
He's tackling it, he said, at the right time. He kept referring to timing. 3 years ago, when the Huskers hired Mike Riley, he wasn't contacted. He stressed that today. He said, I wasn't called, I wasn't interviewed, and he almost thought that was good because he thought the timing timed out well in his career overall.
Yeah, I can remember that period of time, and you know, we were trying to find out who the coaching candidates were, and we got an interview with him over in Eugene when he was with the Oregon Ducks, and he said, haven't heard anything, nothing to talk about, and we didn't know if he, you know, was just kind of avoiding the question or what, but it was true. Nebraska had not contacted him, and he said he was glad because he wasn't ready, and this university wasn't ready for him. And I think the change in leadership was an attraction for him now. He connected with the new president and the new chancellor and the new athletic director. And I think that was probably almost a blessing that he wasn't asked to come back 3 years ago after being an offensive coordinator. I think the head coaching experience really paid off for him at Central Florida.
I think that does play a large factor in it, and I think it also played into, you talk about 100 people with letter jackets right in this third floor at Memorial Stadium to see this press conference. I think it was some delayed gratification for them, but they recognized that maybe the timing wasn't right before, but now they are fully on board. Everyone is sold out. They are on the Scott Frost train, hoping that this really works out here.
Well, Jeff, the Scott Frost era has begun here at Nebraska. Stay with us. We'll have more at 5 o'clock and 10 o'clock on our newscast on WOWT. You can also follow us online at WOWT.com. For Jeff Packer, I'm Ross Jernstrom. Goodbye from Memorial Stadium, where Scott Frost is the new head football coach at the University of Nebraska.